Across the vast and bloody tapestry of human history, we are taught to believe that the fate of nations is sealed on the battlefield, that it is the armies, the generals, the relentless advance of tanks, or the fury of bombs that determine which empires shall live and which shall crumble to dust. But that is only half the story, a comfortable lie that simplifies the complexity of power. The cold metallic truth is that long before a single sword was drawn, the final verdict was delivered in silence, not by armies, but by currency. Yes, currency. The minted metal, the printed paper, the symbol that held the power to finance or to suffocate entire civilizations. In our deep dive into the most forgotten recesses of numismatics, we will not speak of the dollar or the euro. We will speak of the shadows. We will speak of banknotes and coins that, by the narrowest of margins, nearly rewrote the map of the world. Some of these prototypes and short-lived issues were charged with the ambition of uniting continents, of challenging established hegemonies, of forging a new global economic order. They were the materialization of financial utopias. Others, conversely, were the dying breath of fading empires, projects that vanished overnight, swept into the dustbin of history before they could even fulfill their purpose. But here lies the great mystery, the enigma this documentary proposes to unravel. These failed projects, these coins that disappeared, they carried with them more than just a nominal value. Rumors, persistent and whispered among elite collectors, retired bankers, and fringe historians, claimed that these coins and banknotes were backed by something far, far greater. Fortunes that surpassed the GDP of entire nations. Secret reserves of gold, silver, and other precious metals. Hidden treasures in underground vaults, in remote and inaccessible deposits, guarded by security protocols that would be the envy of medieval fortresses. Currencies that failed in the market, but which became, in their failure, the key to unimaginable wealth and the proof of a power that never came to be met. What truly happened to these currencies? Who stopped them? And, crucially, where are the secret reserves that backed them? Prepare yourself. We are about to delve into the hidden side of the global economy, the side where money is more than paper, it is destiny. These are the coins that almost changed the world, and the secrets they carry with them. Case 1, the currency that could have unified the world. To understand the true potential and the tragic failure of the currency that almost unified the world, we must step back in time to the ideological fervor of the early 20th century. The world had just emerged from the horrors of the First World War, a conflict that had shattered economies and ripped the social fabric of European powers. Amidst this ruin, a powerful and hopeful movement arose. The desire to never repeat such a catastrophe. Peace, the thinkers of the era realized, could not be guaranteed by treaties alone. It needed to be cemented by economic interdependence. In this scenario of post-war idealism, visionaries on both sides of the Atlantic, liberal economists, international bankers, and political leaders with a long-term view began intensely debating the creation of a single economy, free from the fluctuations and manipulations inherent in national exchange systems. The proposed solution was bold, almost radical: a universal currency, a single unit of value that transcended borders, eliminated exchange rates, and, ultimately, made global trade an act of peace, rather than a destructive competition. The debates were fierce. There were countless proposals. The Bancorp championed by John Maynard Keynes, the Unitas of other visionaries, and many others aimed at stabilization, but without the ambition of total replacement. However, one proposal in particular gained traction behind the scenes of major international financial conferences. It was more than an idea. It was an almost tangible project, driven by a discreet alliance of banking houses and governments with vested interests in harmonizing international trade. This currency, whose formal name was nearly erased from official records, was known in inner circles only as the global standard coin. What distinguished the global standard coin from other proposals was its foundation. It would not be a fiat currency, dependent on trust in a central government. On the contrary, it would be the embodiment of solidity, backed by colossal reserves of gold. Not just the gold publicly declared in major national reserves, like Fort Knox or the Bank of England, but rather undeclared gold accumulated over centuries by dynasties, colonial empires, and secret financial societies, and quietly transferred into a global stabilization fund that would serve as the guarantor for the new currency. This gold was rumored to be stored in hard-to-reach locations, in vaults built under mountains, perhaps even on remote, unexplored islands, accessible only by submarines or secret tunnels, operated by a financial consortium that existed above government politics. It was the ancestral wealth of the planet, put at the service of global peace and prosperity. This secret reserve had to be large enough to withstand any attempt at speculation or attack by powers resisting unification. The exact amount remains a mystery, but whispered estimates spoke of a sum that exceeded all officially reported gold reserves at the time by at least fivefold. Its existence was the silent guarantee of the global standard coin stability. Prototypes of this coin were even minted. Today, they are collector legends, artifacts of a world that never existed. Coins with a sober yet imposing design, featuring neutral symbols of peace and commerce, instead of kings or national emblems. Their composition was an alloy of gold and platinum, giving them a unique luster and durability that symbolized their intended eternity. Each prototype was a tangible promise of a future without currency wars, yet the project did not survive. The power of national interests was too strong. Jealous bankers, who profited from currency volatility, and nationalist politicians, who viewed the currency as a symbol of sovereignty to be defended at all costs, united to strangle the initiative. The dream of a world currency collapsed in the corridors of power, silenced by logistical problems and technical opposition, according to the official version. The currency never saw the light of day, but the murmurs about its hidden fortune, the secret gold that backed I persist to this day. Where did that gold go when the project collapsed? Was it returned to its secret depositors? Or does it remain dormant, awaiting the next attempt to unify the world? Case 2. The hidden gold of the empire. If Case 1 showed us a currency born of hope, Case 2 takes us to a currency forged in ambition and deceit. We speak here not of idealists pursuing world peace, but of realpolitik in its coldest state. We focus on a vast and powerful empire which, by the mid-century, boasted a currency that didn't just represent wealth, it claimed to be wealth itself. It was the symbol of its hegemony, the pillar of a financial system that stretched across continents and dictated the rules of global trade. This empire, through its central banks, publicly declared that its fiat currency was backed by unshakable gold reserves. Its monetary system was the gold standard for the rest of the world. But this was the facade. The truth, revealed through declassified archives and the testimonies of insiders who broke their silence decades later, was far more explosive. The officially reported reserves were only the tip of the iceberg. To ensure a perceived stability that could intimidate rivals and attract massive foreign investment, the empire maintained an ingenious and audacious scheme: vast, hidden deposits of precious metals that surpassed, by several orders of magnitude, everything publicly declared. These unofficial reserves were the empire's secret insurance policy, a kind of wealth trump card to be used only in case of global collapse or to finance ultra-secret war projects. Where was so much gold hidden? Not in the brightly lit, golden vaults of the capitals, open to rare international inspections. No. These fortunes lay in remote locations, scattered and fragmented to prevent any mass confiscation or attack. Detailed rumors speak of abandoned underground galleries of ancient mines, hundreds of meters deep, sealed and camouflaged beneath desert and mountainous landscapes. There is talk of obsolete military installations, deactivated for decades, where the gold was piled in dusty bars, guarded by archaic but incredibly effective security systems. Secrecy and oblivion. The gold was covered in dust, far from the light, but its silent presence was the true backing of the imperial currency circulating in the streets and stock markets. The irony was cruel. Confidence in the currency depended on a wealth that was actively hidden from its own citizens and trading partners. But, like all empires, this one also began to crack under the weight of its own greed and arrogance. The imperial currency, once the beacon of stability, began to be targeted by speculation and distrust. Rivals demanded conversion to gold, and the empire slowly began to bleed its official reserves. When the empire finally collapsed in a whirlwind of debt, high-paid inflation and political instability, its currency disintegrated. The notes that once bought the world became piles of useless paper, fuel for street bonfires, worth less than the paper they were printed on. The public lost everything. But what about the secret gold? The legend holds that, in the chaos of the collapse, the hidden gold remained untouched. It was too well concealed. The access codes and maps were known only to a tiny elite who disappeared or were silenced during the transition. Thus, the gold that should have saved the empire became a silent relic, a buried treasure linked to banknotes that are now only memories. The empire's currency died, but the treasure it pretended to represent survives, awaiting the archaeologist, the adventurer, or, more likely, the secret heir with the lost map. It is the final parable of wealth. The currency can fail, but the gold, if well hidden, becomes eternal. Case 3. the forbidden currency that threatened the system. The story of the universal currency was one of naive idealism, and that of the empire was one of imperial deceit. Case 3 is about pure fear. Not the fear of failure, but the fear of a success so resounding it threatened to dismantle the foundations of the global financial architecture as we know it. This project was not born of a collapsing empire or a peace movement, but of a technologically advanced nation determined to achieve true economic sovereignty. This nation, tired of being held hostage by interest rates, exchange rate fluctuations, and political pressure imposed by foreign powers through control of the global reserve currency, secretly invested its best intellectual and technological resources. The goal was simple and revolutionary: to develop a new form of money, a system that was efficient, completely stable, and, crucially, immune to external manipulation. It would not just be a precursor digital currency, but a unit of exchange anchored by a stabilization mechanism that made it, in practice, inviolable and self-sustaining. What made it so dangerous? The proposed system eliminated the need for traditional financial intermediaries, accelerated transactions to an unprecedented speed, and was designed to retain value internally, making the nation completely independent of the need to accumulate external currency reserves. It was economic freedom realized. If this currency had been successfully launched, it would have allowed that nation to ignore sanctions, reverse boycotts, and, in essence, break free from the economic dependence imposed by the global status quo. Its success would have created a devastating precedent for the rest of the system. Other nations would have inevitably followed suit, leading to a potential fragmentation of the trade and finance system dominated by the major Western powers. The project, internally named Project Phoenix for its nature of rebirth from the ashes of debt, advanced rapidly. The security infrastructure was in place, the algorithms tested, and the prototypes of the transitional notes and coins artifacts of gold, geometric beauty were ready for mass minting. Everything was set for the launch that would change the world economy. Until, suddenly, the project vanished. Overnight, all documentation was sealed, the engineers transferred, and the printing facilities dismantled. The official justification, cold and bureaucratic, was unresolved technical problems and excessive implementation costs. But diplomatic corridors and international chanceries tell a very different story. This was not a technical failure, it was an intervention. Intelligence sources and senior diplomats of the EU whisper that the pressure was not merely international, but a coordinated action by the established powers who saw the Phoenix currency as an existential threat. Every tool available was used: economic blackmail, veiled military threats, and, ultimately, an offer they couldn't refuse, forcing the government to shelve the project and sign agreements of perpetual dependence. The Phoenix currency prototypes became extremely rare artifacts, the silent proof of a power that was never allowed to exist. And what about the hidden riches that backed the project's initial phase, meant to protect the currency's transition? These were reserves of rare high-tech metals, more valuable than gold, which mysteriously vanished with the project's collapse. Are these reserves rotting in secret warehouses? Or were they discreetly appropriated by the powers that silenced the currency? The only certainty is that the forbidden currency became the phantom of global finance, a reminder that sometimes the success of a currency is the exact reason why it is condemned to extinction. Case for the rare currencies that carry secret fortunes. We have seen the currencies of grand ambitions, imperial deceit, and political fear. But what happens when the failure of a project turns into its greatest, albeit silent, victory? When major financial initiatives die, what remains of them can take to extreme paths. They either become worthless, trash, piles of burned paper with no intrinsic value, or at the opposite pole they ascend to the status of priceless relics. This is where monetary value bends before historical significance and the power of secrecy. We now speak of the survivors, the artifacts that escaped destruction and oblivion. These are the prototypes, the limited editions, the experimental coins that, by being prevented from circulating among the populace, became the rarest and most coveted form of wealth. Think of them as the silent testaments to unwritten history, ancient coins, hidden for centuries in clay pots beneath ruins, forgotten by time and discovered by chance, revealing trade patterns and empires totally unknown to academia. Transitional banknotes, hastily saved from the fires of incinerator furnaces after a project's cancellation, and guarded by a disobedient archivist who realized their future historical worth. To the common market, these currencies are fascinating, but for a handful of elite collectors, ultra-secret investors, and oligarchs with a deep appreciation for history and power, These pieces are more than mere objects of desire. They are the maximum concentration of a fortune disguised as rarity. A single prototype of a coin that almost unified the world can be bid for values that easily surpass the price of luxury mansions or private jets. Why? Because their value lies not in their weight in gold, but in their direct link to power. They are physical access points to narratives that were silenced. It is said that some of these high-level collectors view these coins not just as relics, but as keys. Keys to something more. Perhaps maps? Perhaps codes. The stratospheric value they fetch in private auctions, often conducted under the cloak of anonymity, not paid merely for their beauty or rarity. It is paid for the promise. The promise that the currency might in fact be the final link to one of those secret imperial gold reserves, or the rare metals from the forbidden currency. For these players, the rare coin is not the treasure itself. It is the clue to finding the treasure that backed it. It is the most refined form of conspiratorial investment, buying the history to, perhaps, unlock the hidden wealth behind that history. The currencies that failed in their original purpose as mediums of exchange have, in their rarity, found a much more exclusive and powerful destiny. They have become the hobby of the ultra-rich and the whisper of historians. They prove that when money withdraws from circulation, it transforms into legend. And legend is always more valuable than reality. And in this world of private collections and secure vaults, these artifacts of a world that was not, continue to accumulate not just value, but also mystery. Their true fortune, their real power, may yet be waiting to be discovered. The currencies we have examined on this journey, the global standard coin of universal hope, the empire's notes backed by hidden gold, the forbidden phoenix currency, and the rare artifacts that remain of them all, share the same fate. They never ruled the world. They fell short. But what matters is not that they failed. What matters is how close they came to succeeding. Some were stopped at the very last minute, victims of backroom politics, where the greed of a few leaders overcame the vision of a better future. Others were silenced by war, an inevitable destiny for any wealth that is too visible. And the most dangerous of all was stopped by fear, the fear that the status quo has of being subverted by innovation and true sovereignty. The fear that power will stop flowing through the accustomed channels. But the lesson drawn from these forgotten stories is not about metal or about paper. It is about the intrinsic nature of money. Money has never been, and never will be, just a neutral medium of exchange. It is, in its essence, influence. It is a tool that allows dreams to be built and empires to be torn down. It is the material representation of a nation's destiny. It is, above all, power. And power is what the strongest refuse to share. And so, these relics of the currencies that almost changed the world continue their silent destiny. Some are on display in the most discreet museums, others are rotting in forgotten vaults, and many are kept under lock and key in private collections, inaccessible to the public. They await, not just as testimonies to a history we might have lived, but as a constant reminder that, somewhere, the hidden riches that backed them, the gold of the empire, the rare reserves of the phoenix, remain intact, awaiting the right moment, or the next visionary, to be rediscovered and, perhaps, finally, fulfill their purpose. They are the hidden hoards of a world that never came to be. The question that remains is, who will find them first? Let us know in the comments. Which of these failed currencies do you think would have had the greatest impact on the world today? If you enjoyed this deep investigation into the secrets of money, like this video, subscribe to the Hidden Hoards Files channel for more historical mysteries, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next investigation. Until then, keep questioning what you are given, as certain